It was very striking when I came over to the music industry and saw how few women there were around. For those of you that know retail, there's women at all levels of the organization. So I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion because I think that, while there's been some progress made, I think we've got more to go, and excited to dive into this discussion where we can really use data to help us take the things we knew, but now we have the background behind it to really help us make the path forward about where we need to improve. So I just want to thank everyone for joining.
And Janisha.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this very important conversation. And I'm very honored to be part of this panel of esteemed women in music. My name is Janisha Jones. I'm Director of Systems Integration and Operations at Empire. I'm host of Pub Royalty Clean podcast, where I interview women of color in the music industry about their experiences navigating this white male-dominated industry. And I've led a 10-year career as a data scientist and music publishing expert. And in case you haven't noticed, I am a woman of color, so that makes me an anomaly in this space. But my mission is to change that. And so I think what brings us all together here is the fact that we acknowledge data. It drives results, and that it reveals truths about us, whether we like it or not. I'm looking forward to dive more into those insights as it relates to women of color. So thank you. I'm here to offer insight into a recent study that I also conducted in a similar vein to Be the Change, and also in partnership with Media Research Agency, sponsored by the Black Music Action Coalition, called A Seat at the Table, a perspective on women of color in the music industry, which revealed three very specific things. First, that there's an imbalance of power, to Andrea's point. The second, addressing what intersectionality actually is, which are the challenges faced at the intersection of racial and gender biases within the music community. And then it offers solutions for how we can create meaningful changes that provide equitable opportunities for arguably the most disenfranchised group amongst the music community, which are women of color. So we surveyed about 92 women of color making a living in the music industry, and discovered nuances and challenges that they experienced over several facets of their lives, from education to their family dynamics to career development and advocacy. And so I would love to share some insight into some of the things that were discovered there, that, compounded challenges off of, the intersection of gender and race. So.
I just want to throw this out. I know, Janisha, you had some amazing things to say about perception the other day in our on our prep call, but talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think as women, our opinions are often dismissed because there's a presumption of incompetence. And women of color can't really afford to enter into the music industry without some level of qualification or skills. We just don't have the resources or the connections via relationships directly into the industry. So 92% of women of color tend to earn at least an associate's degree or higher level of education, even though, and this is the caveat, even though they feel like it doesn't actually have any significant impact on their careers over a span of time. And I think that lends itself to the industry just being more of a creative, powering through, the great of being in the industry. And so I think the solution is more about respect, and with authority comes respect. So empowering women to enter into leadership positions will actually combat that boys club culture that exists out there. And we just need to hold more spaces for diverse perspectives, because to the point of being a token person, if you only see one of you in the room, everything that you do tends to lend itself to the collective and not the individual, which is an unfair expectation and responsibility. So those are some things that I think could lend itself to creating a more diverse and inclusive environment, and allow folks of, that are in gatekeeper and decision-making positions to acknowledge that there are some real, genuine, and thoughtful processes being put into place that people and women generally value as well. So
that's great. That's great.
I think that representation really matters. When you see people in those positions, it gives you the opportunity to see yourself in those positions. Women of color occupy marketing, publicity, and front-facing creative roles because it's more performative, and that speaks to the history of oppression on a group of people in this society, but that's another conversation for another day. Once they're empowered with information about how tech and finance and operational roles are high earning potential roles in this industry, I think they will start to tap into those roles specifically. And understanding that there's also a competitive advantage on being in the back end and understanding the actual business practices and operations will empower us more to band together and create an ecosystem that's fair for all of us. So I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders in these spaces to encourage people to take on these other positions, to see that there's financial success on this side as well, and to create some meaningful impact within the industry. I think interestingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, is that women of color tend to be the less protected group. And so what the study showed was that 93% of women of color actually don't believe that the media portrays women of color in a positive way. So that trickles into the misogynoir and the denigration and the content that's being spewed out there in the media. And then that filters into the boardroom and into these spaces that creates this unconscious bias or subconscious bias towards women of color that you are having to refute from every angle. So I think what the solution would be is to create more safe spaces, right? To allow women of color to actually express themselves freely. To your point about there being a collective, a cross collaboration effort so that we can drive the narrative of our culture and who we are as people. And that way, when we're going into these rooms, we're accurately represented. I'd like to offer some information about the study because 80% of women of color actually in this industry actually don't have children. And those that do overwhelmingly are share the burden of raising the child. So, and when we talk about those that are in relationships as well, I mean, that's a very small percentage of us that feel like we have the opportunity to even enter into a relationship in this competitive industry. But when we do, 22% of us actually out earn our spouses or significant others, which has been a point of contention for a lot of relationships and the way those dynamics play out. So I think culturally, there just needs to be a reckoning with where we are as a society, where women are excelling in their personal lives and what they're choosing to invest in, and the industry needing to create some balance and allowing there to be some programs like more work from home structures or hybrid roles to offset some of those responsibilities that women are often having to take on most of the responsibility. Well, I think one of the main things is kind of like the elephant in the room that a lot of my peers and other women of color, people of color in particular, want to express is that with hip hop and R&B and Latin music being the top consumer music, not being driven by people that are actually experiencing those stories is a bit disconcerting. And I think what needs to happen is a reckoning for people who are sharing those actual lived experience driving the narrative. So that's one thing that I'd like to offer. And also just in terms of investing in initiatives led by women, so women-led production agencies, women-led, professional networks, like one that I've just recently entered into a joint venture partnership that hires women of color in the executive leadership roles. It's called the seat, and allowing women to collaborate and investing in those initiatives, I think will go a long way in driving this change. So that's what I would offer to that.